Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley. We're going to be talking today about the transformative power of sound and music with Jeralyn Glass. Jeralyn is internationally acclaimed. She is a singer, pioneering figure in the realm of sound healing, and creator of the Source app. Following the tragic loss of her only son, Dylan, who was only 19 years old, she decided to write her book, Sacred Vibrations, The Transformative Power of Crystalline Sound and Music. She also has a crystal sound healing oracle deck, and it's really cool because it has QR codes where you can actually hear the sound. So we'll be talking more about all of this today. So welcome, Jeralyn.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you both again. I found the bowls 18 years ago. Brought them home to Germany where I was living. So Dylan was a little boy and he loved them. You know, when I first heard them, I was traveling with my mom and they were like these exquisite sounding instruments. And, you know, being a musician, I've heard all kinds of instruments. And I loved the metal singing bowls, but I never had seen crystal instruments. And so I bought a set of 7 and I brought them back to Germany and started playing them for my friends, my students, and my son. And he was like, "Mommy, bring me to bed with my sound blanket." Like he loved the sounds of them. So I've been playing them for a long time. I just not ever thinking then that they would become my way through grief.
Wow. How long has it been since Dylan died?
9 years. Dylan was an athlete. He played football. He was a track star. He was a singer and guitarist and pianist. And he had 7 concussions. And
Oh,
wow.
yeah, Dylan fell into, I would say, a really light depression. I took him to a leading specialist that worked with concussions and brain injuries who, you know, examined him and didn't really find anything that would really cause the depression. But they put him on antidepressants, and a few months later, he was gone.
yeah.
Wow. So
I've unfortunately heard this story before from other people.
I
mean, we wrote a book with Eric Hipple called Real Men Do Cry, and he talks about the concussions he had and later having depression.
Yeah. Dylan was a really highly intelligent, you know, student, and just everybody loved him. But I watched him, especially after the meds. And, you know, we talked about it because he was born in Germany and he grew up very natural and his medicine was homeopathy when he needed it. So he had no experience. But when he came to America, he was like, "Mom, like all my friends, they're on Adderall, they're on all kinds of stuff." So it was something he didn't know. And he, you know, said, if they're going to help me, I'd like to try it. And I was very reticent about it. Did not want that. But the doctor said to me, he's 18 and this is the state of California. You know, And I was like, I'm his parent and I'm going to be paying for it. And it was tough. It was a very tough call. I mean, to put the bigger picture together, I've since understood that Dylan and I had a very intense soul contract together, and that he wasn't going to live a long life. 2 weeks after he died, I was on a call with a psychic and other people, and she called me out. She said, somebody on the call has lost a child. Right. And then she just said, you know that he was never going to live a long life, whether it was now at 19 or whether it was at 22 in a car accident. She said it was never his fate. And when she said that, the goosebumps went all over my body. It was like somewhere I knew that was true. But as a parent, you know, you never follow that train of thought ever.
Yeah.
Right. So I've understood now, I think in the 9 years, the bigger picture that, you know, he and I have something else that we're doing. You know, he's guiding and sharing and helping me through this world, and I write about
That's what I was going to ask you, if you feel him in spirit while you're doing all this sound healing.
Big time. You know, and he kind of guided it. So in the book, there's a thread that runs through Sacred Vibrations about how on the night that he died, I walked down to be in the comfort of nature. I walked down to the ocean with a dear friend, and I looked up at the sky, and there was this huge shooting star that seemed to begin over where I grew up and where he lived with me, and land in the mountains behind LA. And then I heard his voice, Mom, Mom, it's like we always talked about. I'm home. I'm with God. And he was referring to as a child when I would play the bowls and bring him to sleep, and we would pray together, and he loved the bowls on his belly, give me my tummy tickles and my sound blanket. So he was referring to those times as a child that sound was really one of the ways that we connected. And then later he sang, and he was in a big national contest in Germany as a singer in the area of musical theater, and his voice changed a week before the semifinals. So he was like, Mom, what do I do? And we used the bowls. And I had never done that before. As a professor, I had never guided a young man through the voice change, but we used the bowls. And so it was like he stood up a week after playing the bowls and lowering his keys in music. He stood up and he said, My name is Dylan, and since 1 week, I'm no longer soprano. And he was so funny. And I was like, this is insane. Like, this kid is so vulnerable. We don't know if we don't know what his voice is going to do, but he was funny. And I realized that those bowls created a stability and a confidence in him. And just, as an aside, he was working with a citrine alchemy, which is bright yellow, goes with the solar plexus chakra, the chakra that's about your personal power, your self-esteem, your confidence, your courage. That's the bowl he chose, and the note of that bowl was the G note, which corresponds to the throat chakra. Now, I wasn't into any of that really at that point. And then after he died and started saying, Mom, we're going to do sound healing, it was like, son, leave me alone. I'm grieving you. Just leave me alone. But he's really helped to guide me through using the bowls, and his presence and his communication through sound vibration and through these signs has been really, for me, the guide that would help me travel through all the stages of grief.
I'm wondering what it can do for me.
The doctors, after Dylan died, they wanted to put me on antidepressants. It was like, there's no way. Like, that's not my medicine. And so I knew that I had to go and find whatever. Grief is such a personal journey. And so I started playing the bowls in a very, very deep way. And suddenly, just by playing one bowl, I was able, and I was in talk therapy at the time, I was able to keen and groan and make sounds of grief that I could not speak. And suddenly there was just this release from the sound of one bowl. Now I can tell you now what that bowl was doing. It was allowing the grief. So when I said like that we are quartz-like in structure, our bones, our blood, it was allowing an entrainment, meaning that my grief was met by the sound of the bowl. And strangely enough, there were times where the first bowl that I used after he died sounded like nails on a chalkboard. And me as an accomplished musician, I was like, what are you doing wrong, Jeralyn? Like, what are you doing wrong? And it was like, there was nothing I was doing wrong. The bowl was already working its healing magic. It was allowing that grief to be felt and allowing that grief to be expressed. And the nails on the chalkboard was a reflection of what that grief felt like, right? So whatever people are going through, like now I work with hospice patients and their families, cancer patients and their families, veterans and their families, children, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, like you name it. Music is this universal language that everybody understands. And, whether you like, Frank Sinatra, or whether you like Pharrell, or, whether you like jazz or classical music, it doesn't really matter. Music is that language of the heart that touches all human beings. So when we start to use sound in a very specific way with an intention, so if you would say to me, okay, I'm in right at the beginning of my grief and I've lost a child, or I'm at the beginning of my grief because I've been diagnosed with cancer, or I'm at the beginning of my grief because I lost my father, or whatever it may be, sound is a way, what I have learned in these 9 years, that holds us in a safe container where we are allowed to breathe and feel things that we just go, please no, it's too much, right? But suddenly you're being held in the safety of sound, and especially the crystalline sound, and you're able to express. And of course there would be times where you sink deeper in your grief. Suddenly you're more elevated. Then you go back in and you go deep. and then you come out and there's hope, open to hope.
What I want you to do is play some of your music today.
This was the note that Dylan played when he was working through his voice. But my expertise is to put together what bowl feels right for you, or what set of bowls feels right for you. And then you're going to find your held. So just have a listen now. Special sound that I like to work with grief. This is technically called a beat frequency. In a lab, it would be called a binaural beat. Take a listen.
Wow, Jeralyn.
Shimmer. Can you hear that?
Yeah. So powerful.
Important that you have a low note, you have a more centering note, and you have a higher note. And why do I say that? Because if we're working with grief, you can find something that's very grounding. You can find something that's very centering, that holds you safe. You can find something that's expansive, that can help connect you to your loss, to your loved one. And you can also just work with one particular sound. Just one sound. So there's all different ways to work with the sound, and what I've come to really be an expert in is what do you need right now? Like, which of these sounds feels good to you? Do you like this lower sound? Do you like this more centering sound? Do you like this higher sound that's more expansive, connecting us to the divine, to God, to the light, to the place where our beloveds are? Again, it's so personal, as you know, like there's never a one size fits all in music. There just isn't. You like different things at different times. And I think that's what's important, is when you're sitting in that kind of loss or that despair, or that just like not knowing how to go on or how you could ever heal, what feels good to you? We have to start there with what feels safe, what feels good, what feels nurturing. And if somebody had said to me, you have to do this and this and this, and it was no. Grief is a very personal journey. There is no one way for everybody.
Okay, Jeralyn, I love this because I felt like my whole body was vibrating, and I wanted to just shut my eyes and get into it. And I felt like I can see why it's so healing.
Talk about your card deck, because they can get these sounds now without from you.
Yeah. So let me say one thing, but just like one thing that's really important is that what the sound does is your mind goes, ooh, like what you just described. Your mind goes, oh, that's music. That's so beautiful. And in that moment, your mind is quiet. And when the mind is quiet, we can drop in and actually really feel feelings that we say, I don't know how to feel those. Or we can suddenly feel things, but in other words, the thinking mind is not guiding everything. And that's the beauty of the crystalline sound. It's not necessarily words, it's not a song that we know, but it's a sound that everybody can relate to somehow. It's September of 2021, and Dylan goes, Mom, we got to make an oracle deck. And I'm like, son, I'm busy. Like, I don't have time for that. And then the message came again in December of that year. Mom, make the card deck now. And when he talks to me like that, it's like, okay. I tease and I say sometimes my angel son becomes my angel boss. And
Yeah.
it's so cute. And so this is what was born of that. And we started to make the card deck. And the idea that he inspired was that each card, he wants people to be able to have accessibility to these sounds. So each card has a QR code on it, and you put your phone on that QR code, Android or Apple, and it takes you to the sound of your card. So for example, this is a beautiful card. They're made with watercolor and photos and sacred geometry. And in this particular card, it's a set of 5 bowls. So some of them have sets and some of them are individual bowls. And then there's a beautiful guidebook that says what does the card mean for you. There's an alchemy mantra. There's a description about it, and you can dive deeper into the meaning of the sound of that bowl. So this is the same thing. He was like, Mom, you gotta get this information and these experiences for people that they're easily accessible. So this app, we're in a soft launch. It's gonna so you can find it now on the App Store, and it's gonna come out in a bigger fashion by the end of the year. But the idea is that where does science, spirituality, sound vibration, and the healing power of music, where do they intersect? And this is the platform. So you can find long meditations. There's hour meditations with the sound bowls. There's talk about what's cymatics. Why is that important? Cymatics is the study of the shape of sound. There's even some yoga, body awake yoga on there. There's a few lullabies for children made by children that are adorable. So the idea was to have an app that a family could use or just individual people. We have 20 visualizers on the app, and they're all pioneers in the field of sound and energy medicine. Eileen McCusick works with the tuning forks. Jonathan Goldman speaks about constructive and deconstructive sound. And why is all this important? Because I feel very strongly that music is medicine, and there is a medicine when we talk about how do we heal. Like you all know so well, you spent your energies and your lives now in this. How do we heal? How do we heal? When we come through something like the loss and grief that people say, I remember people said to me, hey, you'll never get over it, Jeralyn, so just you're going to live with that. And I remember thinking, I don't want to live the rest of my life never getting over it. And my son, through sound and through vibration, was able to show me and connect with me like, Mom, there's nothing to get over. Yes, I'm not in this physical form, but we will have a relationship until you cross over. Like it's love is eternal, right? And these connections are eternal. They're beyond time and space. I teach trainings, so I teach over 120 hours of trainings if people want to work with the bowls. And then I teach authentic voice classes. How do you free your voice? Like, especially when we're trapped in grief and sadness, how can we ever move through that and express? And I've been a professor since 2006, so I love to help people open their voices. And then we're adding a new class next year, which will be a 4-day retreat into the sacredness of healing. How do we come to express ourselves authentically, to return to a real state of wholeness? And that will be using sound and music as medicine, and exploring in a small group what that's like. Again, the question, how do we heal?
How can people find you?
On crystalcadence.com. That's the main
right.
website, crystalcadence.com.
Well, Jeralyn, thank you so much for being on the show. You're amazing, and give your mother my love.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, Jeralyn, thank you. You are doing so many incredible things. I love the idea of all the sound healing that you're doing. And Dylan is absolutely your guiding light and your teacher. He's pretty amazing the way he's coming through. So that's also a big inspiration. So thank you for everything you're doing, Jeralyn.
Yeah, just let everyone know the last thing we have. There's 2 beautiful pieces of music. One is a song called Joy Reboot, and the other one is an album called Pentatonic Visions, and both highly recommend. And there's lots of music available on wherever you listen to music, Spotify, Apple Music, and our YouTube channel, Crystal Cadence. There's over 200 videos and audios for you to listen to. Again, it's the idea that music is that heart connector for everybody, no matter what language you speak, no matter what religion you are, no matter what culture you come from. And that's what I want to communicate with myself, being a musician all my professional life, and now being able to give people these astounding instruments that are basically 24 years old. They basically emerged in the year 2000. So it's
Well,
like,
thank you, Jeralyn. Much love to you, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
thank you.
Heidi and I want to thank everybody for watching this show today and listening to the show. And we want to always remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.